Okay, so let's talk about finding X and Y-intercepts of rational functions. So we've learned how to find these intercepts with other types of functions, and the process is essentially the same. When you want to find an X-intercept, you let the Y equal 0 and solve for X. When you want to find the Y-intercept, you let the X equal 0 and solve for Y. But we have to be a little careful here because we have excluded values in the rational functions. So when we're finding X-intercepts, we'll have to compare them against the excluded values and make sure they're not excluded. So I've got an example here. Find the X and Y-intercepts of this particular function. So I'm going to walk you through the steps. So really the first thing you want to do on any of these rational functions is to start by factoring the top and bottom. So the top would factor into X minus 6 and X plus 1. And the bottom would factor into X plus 1 and X minus 1. So start by factoring. And then you want to find your excluded values. Now your excluded values, remember, are the numbers that make the denominator equal to 0. And in this case, X cannot be negative 1 because of the X plus 1, and it can't be positive 1 because of the X minus 1. Now, you're ready to find your intercepts. That's really messy, sorry. So when you find your X-intercept, that's letting Y equal to 0. Y, remember, is the same thing as f of X. Now, this is equal to 0, so I'm going to multiply both sides by the denominator, the LCD, to get rid of that. And remember, 0 times that is just going to leave what we had on top. And this is factored, so you use the zero product property. That would tell you that normally X would be 6 and X would be negative 1. But remember, we always, when we're solving anything like this, we have to compare it against the excluded values. So notice that negative 1 is an excluded value, so that is not an X-intercept. That's the extra step you have to take here, is when you find your X-intercept, you have to compare them against the excluded values to make sure they are not excluded. So here, the X-intercept would be 6, 0. The Y-intercept, let me change colors here, is found by letting X equal to 0 and solving for Y. So basically that f of X is Y, so I'm going to replace it with a Y. And then I'm going to plug in 0 for all the X's. Now I could do that in the factored form, or I could do it in the original form, does not matter. But I'm going to do it in the factored form just because that's what I have here. So on top I get negative 6 times 1, which is negative 6. On the bottom I get negative 1 times positive 1, which is negative 1. So the Y-intercept would be 6 here, so it would be 0, 6. And yes, that is a coincidence if they happen to come out the same number. So just to repeat, it's factor the top and bottom, find the excluded values, set the Y equal to 0 to solve for X for the X-intercept and compare it against the excluded values, and then set the X equal to 0 and solve for Y to get the Y-intercept. All right, pause the video and try the problem below. We're going to factor the top and bottom. We're going to find the excluded values. And now we're going to find the intercepts. We're going to start by finding the X-intercept, letting Y equal 0. Multiply through it by the LCD. Solve for X. And compare it against the excluded values. So my X-intercept is negative 5, 0. Now we're ready to find the Y-intercept. Set the X equal to 0. Simplify. And that will be my Y-intercept, 0, 5.